Making headlines for this week of October the 9th. Humble pie. U.S. government has its share, as plans announced to scale back U.S.-sponsored rebel training in Syria. Dirty deeds done dirt cheap. Trans-Pacific and transatlantic deals details more secretive collaboration and corruption. Financial Titanic. Europe and Western media pretend nothing is wrong with banks, but the system is a rapidly sinking ship. And open for business. Following Russia, China now launches its own global international payments transfer system to compete with SWIFT.
With news around, upon, within, and beyond our planet, the program making disclosure official. This is Cosmic Vision News. Here is Jeffrey West.
Greetings and blessings to all. The latest developments regarding Syria coming to airtime on October the 9th appears to be revealing a retreat by the U.S. government, although the real reasons behind the various decisions are not yet clear. Helena Cooper and Eric Schmidt, writing for the New York Times on October the 9th, have reported that the Obama administration on Friday abandoned its effort to build a rebel force inside Syria to combat the Islamic State, acknowledging the failure of its $500 million campaign to train thousands of fighters and saying the remaining money would be used to provide lethal aid for groups already engaged in the battle. The shift in strategy comes amid a huge deployment of force by Russia in support of Syria's leader, Bashar al-Assad, who has clung to power since the civil war began in 2011. Russian airplanes have conducted scores of airstrikes, and Moscow has fired a barrage of cruise missiles at targets in Syria. Mr. Assad and his allies, Russia and Iran, say he is a bulwark against the Islamic State. The United States insists that Mr. Assad must go, though possibly as part of a negotiated transition. For years, the Americans have found it difficult to identify groups in Syria that they can confidently support. A Sputnik News article on October 9th was reporting a DWN newspaper article as stating the following. High-level security advisors to U.S. President Obama recommended that the U.S. should withdraw its military forces from Syria and abandon plans of Assad's resignation. DWN also noted that instead, high-ranking White House officials suggest that the U.S. should undertake steps to improve the situation of the Syrian population and stop the refugee flow. Advisors argue that the overthrow of al-Assad is not enforceable any longer. Therefore, the Americans should pull back their military forces and contribute to the restoration of destroyed cities and the supply of the population instead. According to U.S. officials, these steps would help to stop the massive waves of refugees from the region. Now, some may wonder why Assad is such a threat to U.S. interests. A Facebook posting that came to my news feed recently, but unfortunately without a source, offered a bit of insight. As I was unable to verify the source of this information, please use your own discernment. However, at least some of the material feels good to me. This source posted a photo of al-Assad and his family with the following. These are pictures of Bashar Assad and his wife Asma. You will notice they wear Western clothes. Her hair is not covered, even in public, and she sports a classy bob haircut. And their kids also wear normal Western clothes and celebrate birthdays. These are not Sunni nor Shiite Muslims. They follow the Alawite faith, which, condensed, means get along but don't push or convert me. Many Americans are unaware of Dr. Assad, yes, a medical doctor by training, and his family. Asma graduated from King's College in London in 1996 with a Bachelor of Science degree in Computer Science and a diploma in French literature. She speaks English, Arabic, French, and Spanish. Before she became First Lady, she worked as an economic analyst in banking. Assuming that this information is correct, then she and her husband are nothing like Muslims. And this alone angers the Sunni Muslims in the area because they detest Alawites and have been persecuted by the extremist Sunnis for many centuries. Assad had been accused by the U.S. of using chemical weapons on Syrians, a charge that even the UN has admitted that Assad was not guilty of and that he was framed. A highly educated family in the Western world by Western standards, who would be intimately aware of what the Western world is doing to other countries, would surely represent a threat to Western interests. Perhaps even more threatening to the Western interests is the fact that Assad, according to an RT article in June of 2014, was re-elected with 88% of the popular vote, something that no Western leader has been able to come close to achieving in recent memory. In 4 years, the U.S. has been conducting a bombing campaign allegedly against a terrorist group named ISIS or Islamic State. The Syrian people are being dominated by fear and war, and more recently are being forcefully relocated into countries around Europe with an intentional agenda of destabilizing Europe. Then along came the Russian bear. An article on October the 1st on the Fort Russ blog page reported that Russia had done more to ISIS in Syria in 1 week than the U.S. had done in an entire year. This article was followed up with a second article on the same website on October 6th, stating that the campaign began to reveal once and for all who the real sponsors of terrorism are in the world. While the Western media and leaders still attempt to smear Russia through seemingly false accusations, a Syrian opposition leader has admitted, according to a Russian news source, Pravda, that Russia was in fact only targeting the terrorists and not Syrian interests. As was reported last week, Russia is actually in alignment with international law, as they are in Syria by invitation of the government, while the U.S. is not, meaning the U.S. is in violation of international law. A Sputnik News article on October 4th has pointed out that Putin holds all the trump cards in his hands. The West played all their aces, including the sanctions card against Russia, and it has failed, rather miserably. According to this article, by setting up military operations in Syria, Russia put the screws on the Western countries, which don't have any bargaining chips to force the Kremlin to change its policy. More reports are coming out this week alleging that the Russian campaign has been going so well that fighters are abandoning their posts and fleeing the country, or to any safe haven, or surrendering to Syrian government forces. Sputnik News reported on October 3rd that hundreds of militants and other law offenders decided to hand themselves over to authorities under the terms of a national reconciliation program. The warmongering neocons in the U.S. are no doubt livid with the turning of events against the interests they represent. Dr. Kevin Barrett, speaking to Press TV in Iran, shared this information, reported on October 6th, regarding one U.S. official, Zbigniew Brzezinski, calling for greater attacks on Russia.
Well, Zbigniew Brzezinski's argument that the U.S. should retaliate against Russia for Russia's attacks on U.S. assets in Syria is a stunning admission from a senior high-level policy advisor here in the U.S. that the U.S. is in fact using Al-Qaeda and perhaps Islamic State as well as assets. This is not something that is normally admitted by officials in Washington, D.C. That is, that Al-Qaeda in Syria, the al-Nusra Front, is actually a U.S. ally. I think the American people will be very interested to hear that just 14 years after the attacks of September 11th, 2001, which were officially blamed on Al-Qaeda, which even then was called by some people al-CIA, having had relationships with the U.S. in the Afghan jihad against the Soviet Union, that this supposedly demonized enemy group that we're told was responsible for killing 3,000 Americans on September 11, 2001, is now our ally in Syria, and we should go to war with Russia and risk a nuclear war that could end life on the planet in order to punish Russia for fighting against Al-Qaeda. It's kind of mind-boggling that anyone could even imagine the U.S. retaliating against Russia for Russia's attacks on Al-Qaeda. But that's precisely what Brzezinski says. Brzezinski, for better or worse, is actually considered one of the more sensible and level-headed people in Washington, which tells you something about the other people around him, the neoconservatives who are much crazier even than he is. I guess to explain this, we would just have to note Brzezinski's background. He's from a Polish nobility kind of family background, which explains why he hates Russia so much and has been trying to push aggressive policies against Russia throughout his whole life. But it's still stunning and disgraceful that when Russia has intervened at the behest of the Syrian government, which is fully legitimate under international law, to shore up that government against these groups like al-Nusra and the Islamic State, in order to try to stabilize the situation and lay the groundwork for a kind of a peaceful solution, that the response from Brzezinski would be that we need to attack Russia. Let's hope that somewhere in the corridors of power there's someone who's more sensibly a realist than Brzezinski is, who will recognize that the U.S. should have accepted the peace offers that were on the table years ago and are really still on the table. All it takes is recognition that the U.S. regime change operation in Syria has gone awry. It's time to call it off and to seek stability rather than destabilizing and destroying Syria and the surrounding countries.
Putin has so obviously outsmarted the cabal-controlled governments of the West because he had the foresight to see that the West was going to try to bait Russia into responding to certain provocations. Putin did not have to do anything, however, because, as many will know, Russia and China are in the process of implementing their own financial tools on a global scale that will help further collapse the cabal's house of cards. All Putin has to do is continue to talk strongly, act decisively when necessary, and not be drawn into any compromising traps that will give the Western leadership or media any reason to justify their desire for military action. Paul Craig Roberts addressed some of this in a recent interview on King World News.
I want to start off with the situation in Syria. Obviously, the Russians have stepped in. They have bombed key targets, and the rest of the world is watching and saying Putin just took over the show and put a stop to the madness.
Certainly looks that way. You know, he told the world at the UN meeting on the 70th anniversary the other day, this is a direct quote, "We can no longer tolerate the state of affairs in the world." Now, he was speaking for Russia, not for the world. So he simply told the United States and Europe and the other American puppet states, Canada, Australia, Japan, that Russia no longer tolerates it. And 2 days later, they've taken over the situation in Syria. And his determination is to stop the Islamic State, which essentially the United States is responsible for. This is the group that came out of the forces we created in Libya to overthrow Gaddafi. And when Russia blocked the intended Obama invasion of Syria, Obama sent these people to Syria and pretended they were a free Syrian army of oppressed Syrians who were fighting to liberate their country from a dictator who used chemical weapons against his own people. But the United States lost control of them, even though apparently Washington's clandestine operation seems to still supply them. Basically, the Russians have said that they can't tolerate complete, total chaos in the Middle East, and it's going to stop before it engulfs Syria. What we see here is real leadership, something the United States has totally failed to provide for a long time. What we're witnessing here is the president of Russia providing the long-missing American leadership. And it's very interesting because if you remember one of the famous statements from George Orwell, which is that in times like today, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. And that's precisely what Putin did at the UN. He stood up and told the truth. And he asked Obama to his face, quote, Do you realize what you have done? And what does the United States have to use against this truth? Nothing. The lies from Washington, the lies of the neocons, they're wearing out. So I think what the world saw at the 70th anniversary was the triumph of Russia. And Russia has now stepped into the leadership role. And there's really nothing the United States can do except behave in an even more reckless manner, which I don't think we're capable of confronting Russia on these terms.
Dr. Roberts, let me ask you this. Now that Putin has stepped in, asserted his hand, and put a stop to the madness, at least for now, where do we go from here?
That's what we will learn. The Russian government very quickly supported this. I mean, this all happened amazingly quick. I think this is one of the things that has stunned Washington, is Putin comes to the UN, tells everybody that we can no longer tolerate the state of affairs in the world. And 2 days later, he's out there bombing ISIS. This is amazing. And the Russian equivalent of the National Security Council very quickly ratified his decision, as did the parliament. And so these are not people that sit around sucking their thumb and arguing with each other, and they figure out what has to be done, they act decisively. And the whole time he's very polite. I mean, he did ask Obama to realize what you've done. But he's polite. He doesn't call people names like they call him, doesn't threaten them with sanctions, or he doesn't even put reverse sanctions. You know, the Russian response to the sanctions was very mild. It's hurt European agriculture. But he found the least thing to do and did it. He's not provocative, but he's decisive, and he's not going to put up with this anymore. It's not, and it's not Putin. It's the country. His approval rating is 86%. This is unheard of in any Western country. And moreover, the remaining 14% that's not approving him, 11% of that disapproves because he's too easy on the West. So in effect, he's got like 97% of the people behind him. And no country has that kind of support behind the political leaders.
By international standards, the actions of Russia would indeed be considered polite. An article on the Global Research website on October 7th by Felicity Arbuthnot writes that, did U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry even blush when Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov remarked over the unspoken questions as to whether Russia would extend its air coverage to terrorist groups in Iraq, and that they had no such plans? According to Lavrov, we are polite people. We don't come if not invited. Vladimir Putin had said, we have an invitation, and we intend to fight against terrorist organizations and them only, possibly referring to allegations that the U.S. has been targeting Syrian government sites and military personnel. Russia's diplomatic envoys were reasonably polite to the U.S. also. Before embarking on airstrikes, according to U.S. State Department spokesman John Kirby, a Russian official in Baghdad this morning informed U.S. Embassy personnel that Russian military aircraft would begin flying anti-ISIL missions today over Syria. So it appears that Russia is doing everything in its power to keep everything as transparent as possible. And no doubt they are filming and recording every mission in the event that Western interests try to pawn off further lies to the media. What appears to be happening now in the Middle East is nothing short of a major shifting of power in the region. According to a Zero Hedge article on October the 1st, it would be difficult to overstate the significance of what appears to be going on here. This is nothing short of a Middle Eastern coup as Iran looks to displace Saudi Arabia as the regional power broker, and as Russia looks to supplant the U.S. as the superpower puppet master. Mike Whitney, writing for Counterpunch.org on October the 6th, described how Putin would win in Syria. He writes, the reason Putin will succeed where the U.S. failed in its war on ISIS is because the Russian airstrikes are going to be accompanied by a formidable mop-up operation that will overpower the jihadi groups on the ground. This is already happening as we speak. CVN listeners may recall an audio clip of retired General Wesley Clark, who has been speaking on the Wolfowitz Doctrine, a plan by the U.S. to destroy the governments of 7 countries in 5 years. A Russian-Insider.com article on October 7th has reported that by bombing ISIS, al-Nusra, and other jihadis in Syria who are focused on overthrowing Russian ally Assad, Putin has put an end to the Wolfowitz Doctrine. A 21st Century Wire news article on October 7th by Stuart Hooper was highlighting all the success that Russia was having, but finishes up his article with the following. If these facts were not enough to cause huge embarrassment for the West, who was supposedly fighting ISIS for over a year, an Iraqi official has now said that it wants Russia to have a bigger role in solving their issues than America. Hakim al-Zamili, the chairman of Iraq's Defense Committee, said, "We are seeking to see Russia having a larger role in Iraq. Yes, definitely a bigger role than the Americans, primarily due to their success in Syria." Behind the scenes, however, we still cannot ignore some of the other things unfolding. An article on the fourthmedia.org website on October 4th was reporting that the United States has already been checkmated in Syria. Russia has already gained a firm military foothold in the Middle East, and as the reader will soon discover, China is sending some of its military in support of Russia's efforts in Syria as part of a newly forming BRICS coalition being put together to destroy ISIS. Germany just threw its support of Putin, putting boots on the ground in Syria to fight the CIA-created ISIS. Germany is on the edge of leaving NATO. The United States has responded with shipping its most modern nuclear weapons to Germany this week. If NATO is on the rocks, and that almost certainly appears to be the case according to the article, the U.S. has a very narrow window from which to launch an attack upon Russia to counter its moves in Syria, its growing threat to the Baltic states, and its newly forming partnership with Germany, which serves to undermine NATO. It's pretty safe to say that there will be no nuclear war on a global scale. Putin is too calmly confident and level-headed for this. Russia has already demonstrated an ability to use EMP, electromagnetic pulse technology, to disable U.S. warships. Now, there is perhaps another very important observation that must be made, and I direct this to people who are haters of President Obama and feel that he is destroying the U.S. The fact is that the U.S. has already been destroyed by corporate and elite interests. This was done long ago, and Obama is not to blame for this. Some sources have speculated that both Obama and Putin are fulfilling their soul contracts at this time. Some, perhaps even myself a couple of years ago, felt that Obama was to be a savior of the Western world. Given the level of corruption within the Western world, however, it became more clear to me that one man could not take this on all by himself. The world witnessed what happens to leaders who attempt to take on the global cabal when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. I'm beginning to see another possible strategy in play now. I personally have speculated in the past that Obama and Putin may be working together on a much higher level, either consciously or unconsciously, to move this world forward for global peace. If one was to consider for a moment the things unfolding in the world at this time, let's consider what might be happening now if there was a Republican government in office still controlled by the Zionist Jewish lobby. We would most likely have the U.S. going to war against Russia or anyone else aligning with Russia and China. Those who are accusing Obama of destroying America may be missing the bigger picture, that he is actually saving America by not putting the military into action and allowing the strategic moves of Russia and China to put a new economic model into place that will shut down the current criminally corrupt banking system. By not reacting the way a Republican president likely would have, Obama is indirectly helping the American people and the Western world. His actions to progressively isolate Israel over the last couple of years has shaken the confidence of those supporting the Zionist agenda, and thus made it harder for Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu to have any credibility on the global stage as he tries to justify claims for attacking Iran. Those claiming that Obama is destroying America are likely basing those claims on their selfish and materialistic belief that the U.S. must remain as the only world power and controller of global wealth. The world is now demanding an end to this, and countries are moving towards aligning with the East. By not engaging in war, Obama is preventing the U.S. corporate elite interests from destroying something that is now ready to unfold worldwide. And this is a new economic paradigm backed up with new technologies, but more importantly, a strong call from the people to create a world of greater peace and harmony. Just because things may not be working out the way we want does not mean that things are not working out the way they should. It's when one begins to step back and begin to observe the bigger picture, one may begin to also grasp that something else is happening on an even higher level, the bigger picture. It is from this vantage point that one may begin to feel some degree of anticipation and perhaps even excitement with the events unfolding at this time. It may look scary on one level, and yes, there is the potential for things to get messy, perhaps even ugly in the short term. I choose to have faith in the strength of humanity at this time and the voice that the people are starting to stand up and use. We are making a difference, and it is now being seen worldwide on multiple levels if one is willing to see beyond the Western media lies and propaganda. In other geopolitical news, one of the other weapons of mass distraction underway on a global scale involves the negotiations surrounding the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement and other similar international trade agreements. Under the distractions of refugee crises and war rhetoric against Russia, some Western power brokers were meeting secretly to attempt to finalize an international trade agreement that gives more power to corporations than to countries. Zero Hedge reported on October 5th that once again the corporatocracy wins as the so-called Trojan horse, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP, trade agreement has been finalized. As the Wall Street Journal reports, the U.S., Japan, 10 countries around the Pacific reached an historic accord on Monday to lower trade barriers to goods and services and set commercial rules of the road for 2/5 of the global economy, officials said. If one uses one's head for a moment just to think this through, if there was any reasonable chance that the world was going to go to nuclear war, as we heard in the last story, do you really think that the media would be concerning itself with an international trade deal? Would leaders really be spending time working on this if they truly believed that the world as they currently know it is about to go up in a nuclear fireball? Somehow, I highly doubt it. The article notes that Obama is likely to have trouble getting it passed through Congress. Presidential candidate Bernie Sanders and Senator Elizabeth Warren have already come out hitting hard against the deal. In Canada, at least one political party, and probably two in there have suggested that they will cancel the deal if elected. It should not be a surprise that biotech companies and pharmaceuticals were among the big winners with the alleged agreement. It isn't over yet, however. The article refers to the Financial Times, where FT reported that the deal announced on Monday by trade ministers from the 12 countries still must be signed formally by the countries' leaders and ratified by their parliaments. In the U.S., Mr. Obama is likely to face a tough fight to get the deal through Congress next year, especially as presidential candidates like Republican frontrunner Donald Trump have argued against the TPP. Critics around the world have also lambasted the deal for being negotiated in secret and being biased towards corporations, criticisms that are likely to be amplified when the national legislatures seek to ratify the TPP in the months to come. The Zero Hedge article summarizes as follows. Packaged as a gift to the American people that will renew industry and make us more competitive, the TPP is a Trojan horse. It is a coup by multinational corporations who want global subservience to their agenda. Buyer beware, citizens beware. Crossing the Atlantic now, and Europe appears to be rebelling against the TTIP agreement, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, which is the Atlantic version of the Pacific trade deal. The article adds that concern over the impact of TTIP has united disparate groups from French farmers to German constitutional lawyers and politicians on the left and right. 50,000 demonstrators are expected to gather in front of Berlin's central train station on October 10th to protest both the TTIP and a similar deal between the EU and Canada, known as the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, or CETA. That event is part of the week-long International Days of Action against corporate-friendly trade deals. 2/3 of Germans are now opposed to the deals, hence the expected strong turnout. The European public, already heavily opposed to TTIP, also oppose America's bombings of Middle Eastern countries, which have forced hundreds of thousands of refugees into Europe. European leaders are being compelled to question their relationship and alliance with the United States. The result of America's constant pressure and bullying of its European allies to get involved in the bombing of countries where millions of refugees are expected in the year ahead is that the European people are, in greater numbers, questioning the rationality of their elected leaders. This has only added to EU citizens' suspicions over secret trade deals such as the TTIP with America, and is not only empowering them, but forcing their own leaders to rethink the order of importance. One has to wonder if maybe there is no TPP or TTIP at all, and perhaps it is another smokescreen to get people all worked up in arms and distracting them while missing something else that is possibly going on in the background. In financial news, there are a few potential items worth looking at this week, and we start by taking a look at news coming out of Europe. On October the 6th, an article on the Investment Research Dynamics website noted that something occurred in the banking system in September that required a massive reverse repo operation in order to force the largest ever Treasury collateral injection into the repo market. Ordinarily, the Fed might engage in routine reverse repos as a means of managing the Fed funds rate, but there have been sudden spikes up in the amount of reverse repos that tend to correspond to some kind of crisis, the obvious one being the de facto collapse of the financial system in 2008. The blame on the general stock market plunge was cast on the Fed's inability to raise interest rates. However, that seems to be nothing more than a clever cover story for something much more catastrophic which began to develop out of sight in the general liquidity functions of the global banking system. Without a doubt, the graphs are telling us that something broke in the banking system which necessitated the biggest injection of Treasury collateral in history into the global banking system by the Fed. On September 29th, Xu-Ping Chan, writing for the London Telegraph, reported that the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, has issued a double warning over higher U.S. interest rates, which said it could trigger a wave of emerging market corporate defaults and panic in financial markets as liquidity evaporates. The IMF said an illusion of abundant liquidity may have encouraged excessive risk-taking by some investors that could cause market fluctuations if many investors suddenly rushed to the exit. While the Telegraph article does not specifically mention China, Philip Inman, writing for the London Guardian, suggested that the IMF was placing blame on China, writing that the risk of a global financial crash has increased because a slowdown in China and decline in world trade are undermining the stability of highly indebted emerging economies. As you will hear in a few moments, the only movements that China and Russia appear to be doing at this time are to set up a new system that will replace the currently collapsing system. Inman doesn't seem to acknowledge the other changes taking place. Germany's Deutsche Bank is in trouble on at least two different fronts this week. Market Watch published an article on October 8th reporting that a former Deutsche Bank senior trader pleaded guilty to conspiring to rig a key lending benchmark, the latest admission in a long-running investigation. While rate manipulation was widespread, the authorities have said Deutsche Bank was especially aggressive and had slowed the probe by refusing to cooperate fully or by misleading investigators. In April, the Frankfurt-based bank admitted to the manipulation and agreed to pay a record $2.5 billion to resolve charges in the US and the UK. Of course, the question would now be, who was the recipient of that $2.5 billion fine, and why was it not returned to investors? In the other article, appearing on Investment Research Dynamics on 09 October, the author reported having a friend connected to Deutsche Bank as having said the following. His sources describe Deutsche Bank as being a toxic junkyard of chaos and complete unaccountability. On October the 8th, a Zero Hedge article by Tyler Durden writes that not everything is fine in the land of European banks. In fact, quite the opposite. The official narrative is well known. The bank does not need the funds. It is simply a precaution ahead of new, more stringent capital requirements. The real reason has everything to do with the collapse of manipulation cartels involving LIBOR, FX, commodities, bonds, equities, gold, and so on. Because when banks can no longer collude with each other to push markets in any given direction, that's when they start losing money. In the same article, Durden notes that Switzerland's Credit Suisse Bank was also claiming to need more funds. In a separate article on Market Watch, Credit Suisse was apparently singled out as having reported that the global markets are getting back to panic levels. The day before, Durden had posted another article relating to one specific company, Glencore, that has suddenly been exposed as having a shocking $100 billion in debt, and Durden states that this is the next Lehman event. For new listeners, it was the collapse of the Lehman Brothers holdings in 2008 that triggered the last financial crisis. While all this is going on, a pertinent question has to be asked. According to the website of The Economist, there is a global debt clock as of October 9th that was showing the total global debt as being roughly $57,125 billion. In the U.S., the website for the U.S. debt clock, debtclock.org, has estimated that of the $57 trillion of global debt, about $18.4 trillion of it belongs to the U.S. The question, therefore, is this: to whom is this debt owed? Of course, for those who have even a basic grasp of the fractional reserve model of banking, one will have to know that it is mathematically impossible to get out of the debt we are currently in, and therefore the only thing left to do, as the global cabal finally collapses, is to issue a global debt jubilee. On October the 6th, Reuters news service had reported that through China's alleged slowdown, that the country should float its currency, the yuan. Now, not being a financial expert, as I have said many times before, please do not accept my interpretation as truth here. But it seems that the IMF may have just turned its back a bit on the US by telling China to do this. When Switzerland floated its currency earlier this year, there were shockwaves in the international markets as Switzerland apparently depegged its currency from the US dollar by doing this float. If this is what the IMF is telling China to do, then this could send even more tidal waves through the markets. For those who do not understand what is happening, or for those who are firmly addicted to the materialistic way of living associated with the old financial paradigm. The news just presented will likely make those people feel extremely uncomfortable, if not fearful. It is not meant to be this way. Humanity was never meant to be in this much debt, nor were we meant to be enslaved to a system of debt, fear, and separation, while being controlled by a criminal system of commercial law. What we are experiencing is a movement to begin breaking these chains, and like getting away from the withdrawal symptoms of breaking an addiction, humanity is going to have to go through the painful process of withdrawing from this system. For some, it may feel like the end of the world, but it does not have to be. We are witnessing the answer to a global prayer, but the local bully still needs to be taken down. Christina Sarich, writing for Nation of Change back in May of 2014, remember, that was last year, she had reported that just a few weeks ago, 132 nations decided they've had enough of the secret money jig we've all been dancing to. One of the largest coalitions of developing nations in history has urged the Secretary General of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, to provide as soon as possible alternative options for banking services. 132 countries, including China, are done with the funny money scheme. Again, remember, that was last year when that was written. China and Russia are in the process now of rolling out a new system that is being demanded by countries around the world, and the Western media are not reporting this in their countries, so that the wealthy elitists can continue to scam and profit as long as possible at the expense of the people before they are finally and completely shut down. Anonymous is also doing its part to try to help. A campaign has been launched by the group called Operation Black October and is targeting the banking system. According to an article on the hangthebankers.com website on October 8th, U.S. branches of Germany's Deutsche Bank and Spain's Banco Santander have failed the U.S. federal stress tests, while America's largest bank, Bank of America, has been put on warning. How far can the ordinary people shoulder responsibility of a failed private bank? Anonymous asks you to join the peaceful revolution from October 1st to the 31st called Operation Black October. Take all your money from your bank account, don't use your credit card, pay cash, and change your future. Not everyone will be able to do this, of course. But what is important is that each individual find a meaningful way that will allow him or her to support any movement that begins to erode the financial control the global banking cabal has had over humanity. Like small bubbles in a drink that join other small bubbles to create a bigger bubble, so too can humanity take small steps that together have the collective impact of a tsunami of undeniable people power that will tear down structures of enslavement worldwide. Over to Asia now, and following on the heels of the launch earlier this year of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank in China, comes the next financial missile to the current global financial system. One of the tools that the Western banking cabal members have been using against the people of the world is a system of international money transfer known as SWIFT. This system has been highly controlled, and arguably it has also been set up to benefit certain wealthier elitists and their organizations and corporations, while imposing more strict regulations upon the mainstream population. China and Russia are moving along quickly at implementing a competing banking system to the Western structure. Russia and China are participating in the BRICS Development Bank, and China has implemented its own AIIB bank, as mentioned moments ago, both of which were set up to compete against the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. Russia has now also launched its own money transfer system that is currently available across Russia and is planned for future expansion within the BRICS-aligned countries to start with. An article by Ariel Rodriguez on the Global Research website reported on October 6th that after the reintegration of Crimea in Russian territory, the United States has pressured regulatory authorities of the European Union to restrict the access of Russia to SWIFT, the system of international payment founded by 200 Anglo-Saxon banks in the decade of the 1970s. In response, the government of Vladimir Putin has established an alternative system of payments that has already begun to extend its operations among Russian banks and has served as an inspiration for China as well as other countries that make up BRICS. She continues, adding that the unipolarity of the United States in the world financial system is rapidly fading. As a consequence of their political nearsightedness, Washington has obliged other countries to establish instruments of financial cooperation that abandon the use of the dollar, as well as multilateral institutions that are no longer guided by the rules imposed by the U.S. Treasury Department. The fact is that finances and money have been utilized as instruments of foreign policy, that is, as mechanisms of global domination that look to undermine both geopolitical adversaries, such as Russia, as well as rising economic powers, such as China, that resist submitting themselves to the North American yoke. Faced with the impossibility of establishing their strategic objectives through diplomacy, the United States is engaged in a financial war, either through economic embargoes, speculative attacks, freezing bank accounts of politicians and businessmen, and so forth. In open violation of the principles of international law, Washington aims its artillery at countries that make up the so-called axis of evil: North Korea, Iran, Syria, Sudan, and so forth. Their modus operandi consists in strangulating the economies of the countries involved in order to provoke a change of regime. Russia and President Putin have been the recent target of this Western aggression. Although the SWIFT system is technically supposed to be neutral, the U.S., via the NSA, managed to get its tentacles into the system after 9/11 to monitor and control funds of any and all they deemed to be terrorists or threats to their hegemony. Rodriguez also adds the following. The United States undertook a quasi-monopolistic control of the system of international payments in order to asphyxiate their rivals. To date, the disconnection of SWIFT has not been implemented against Russia because of a lack of authority on the part of the regulatory authorities. It is one thing to chastise a regional power and quite another to take on a face-to-face battle with a world power. With all that, the constant threats from the United States and their European allies led the government of Vladimir Putin to establish an alternative system of payments. More than 90% of the Russian banks' operations are cross-border, so that if the expulsion of Moscow from SWIFT were realized, the consequences for the world economy would have been catastrophic. About Russia's payment transfer system, Rodriguez closes stating the following. The new system of transactions from Russia diminished the costs in comparison with SWIFT, and more importantly, gave Moscow greater political autonomy and economic security in case of new sanctions. The plan orchestrated from Washington and Brussels against Russia ended with a boomerang effect, since it not only involved the expulsion from SWIFT, but Moscow established an alternative system that completely neutralized the attempts of destabilization and has served as the inspiration for the BRICS countries and will soon serve the majority of emerging economies. Well, this week, numerous sources are reporting now that China has now officially launched the China International Payment System, or CIPS, its own version of a global payment transfer system. According to an RT article on October the 9th, the China International Payment System, CIPS, intends to internationalize the yuan and challenge the US dollar's dominance. CIPS will accept payments in cross-border trade, direct investments, financing, and personal remittances. The system is open for operations 11 hours a day. 19 banks have been authorized to use SIPs. 8 of them are Chinese subsidiaries of foreign banks, including Citi, Deutsche Bank, HSBC, and ANZ. The website for the Russian news service TASS reported on the same day that SIPs, seen as China's alternative to SWIFT, is expected to enable foreign market participants to carry out settlements in yuan directly with Chinese partners. The Chinese government hopes SIPs will increase the international recognition of China's national currency. Sputnik News added to their story that SIPs' first phase provides clearing and settlement services, according to the People's Bank of China. Its launch is said to remove hurdles to the yuan's internationalization by reducing transaction costs and processing times. The launch bolsters China's efforts to join the International Monetary Fund's Special Drawing Rights Basket, or SDR. The news of the launch follows another recent announcement from China. Sputnik News reported on October 7th that the Chinese currency, the yuan, has entered the top 4 of most used world payment currencies for cross-border payments as of August this year, overtaking the Japanese yen by value, a report by SWIFT has revealed. If China was to take all of its business away from the SWIFT system and bring also with it the business of the BRICS-aligned countries and more, it could represent a major earthquake to the cabal-dominated system, indicating that they are losing more and more financial control to other interests. In general news, the good news of the week for those against genetically modified foods, dangerous pesticides, and biotech multinationals, it seems Monsanto may finally be on the downward spin. The voice of people worldwide seems to be finally having an impact upon the bottom line of the company in the U.S. According to Matthew Perron from the Associated Press on October 7th via Yahoo News, Perron reports that Monsanto said on Wednesday it will eliminate 2,600 jobs as part of a cost-saving plan designed to deal with falling sales of its biotech seeds and herbicides, which pushed its quarterly losses deeper into the red. The job cuts will reduce the company's 22,500 employee workforce by about 12% over the next 2 years. To give you an idea of how insanely a multinational company treats its employees, the article notes the following. The St. Louis-based agricultural giant predicts the move will generate between $275 and $300 million in savings by the end of the fiscal year 2017. The cost of the reorganization resulting from those job losses, which will streamline sales and research and development and other departments, is estimated to cost $850 to $900 million. Monsanto's last round of layoffs came in June of 2009 when the company slashed 900 jobs. Noting several global and industry headwinds, Monsanto said it expects full-year earnings in the range of $5.10 to $5.60 per share. The company has also said it will repurchase $3 billion in shares under an accelerated buyback plan over the next 6 months. Earlier this year, Monsanto attempted to grow its global business by making an unsolicited bid for competitor Syngenta. But in August, Monsanto abandoned the plan after the Swiss chemical producer rejected an offer of nearly $47 billion. So the company is willing to lay off 12% of its workforce and use that money over several years to reorganize the company while simultaneously repurchasing $3 billion in shares and while making a $47 billion bid for a rival company. Meanwhile, an article from last April by Christina Sarich appearing on the Natural Society website revealed a Monsanto employee as having let it slip that there is an entire department within the company that is dedicated to discrediting scientists who disagree with the company. If these are not signs of the importance for people to break away from the controls and influence of multinationals and start coming together on local levels to help support a community locally towards becoming more self-sustainable, I'm not exactly sure what is. Over to disclosure-related news for the week now, and it seems that NASA just seems to keep rolling out one little surprise after another regarding our solar system or our universe, as they continue what appears to be their soft disclosure program to inform humanity that there is an abundance of life, not only beyond Earth, but also far beyond Earth. The announcements of various changes happening on a number of planets seems to coincide with other information some sources are receiving via channeled communications that significant changes are underway, not only on Earth, but on the Sun and every planet within our solar system. Following the recent announcement of water on Mars, NASA announced this past week on their website that the first color images of Pluto's atmospheric hazes have been returned by NASA's New Horizons spacecraft last week, and they reveal that the hazes of the planet are blue. The press release continues, writing that the haze particles themselves are likely gray or red, but the way they scatter blue light has gotten the attention of the New Horizons science team. That striking blue tint tells us about the size and composition of the hazy particles, said science team researcher Carly Howitt. A blue sky often results from scattering of sunlight by very small particles. On Earth, those particles are very tiny nitrogen molecules. On Pluto, they appear to be larger, but still relatively small, soot-like particles we call tholins. Scientists believe the tholin particles form high in the atmosphere, where ultraviolet sunlight breaks apart and ionizes nitrogen and methane molecules and allows them to react with one another to form more and more complex, negatively and positively charged ions. When they combine, or rather when they recombine, they form very complex macromolecules, a process first found to occur in the upper atmosphere of Saturn's moon Titan. The more complex molecules continue to combine and grow until they become small particles. Volatile gases condense and coat their surfaces with ice frost before they have time to fall through the atmosphere to the surface, where they add to Pluto's red coloring. In a second significant finding, New Horizons has detected numerous small exposed regions of water ice on Pluto. Scientists are not yet able to explain why water seems to be visible on some parts of the planet, yet not visible on other parts. Although the New Horizons probe is now 5 billion kilometers from Earth, all systems on the craft are healthy and operating normally. NASA scientists are not yet able or not yet willing to reveal why water seems to be suddenly appearing on various planets. Another article may be hinting at the real cause. CVN has reported recently the increased solar activity and activity that is apparently being reported on numerous planets within our solar system. An article appearing on the space.com website reports that nothing is stable, including the solar system. New evidence suggests the solar system is moving into a new energy zone, which is altering the magnetic fields of the planets. There is reason to believe Earth is not the only planet in the solar system undergoing climate change, meaning carbon dioxide emissions are not the primary force responsible for the rise in global temperatures. Growth of the dark spots in Pluto, reports of auroras on Saturn, polar shifts in Uranus, and changes in light intensity of Neptune suggests something very strange is happening in the solar system. The article continues. Many scientists suspect that the solar system has migrated to a region of the galaxy with high energy. The warming of the entire solar system has been supported by some scientists. One dramatic shift that is taking place is the strength of the sun's electromagnetic field. According to a study by Dr. Mike at Lockwood Rutherford Appleton National Laboratories in California, the sun's magnetic field has increased by 230% within the last 100 years. The energetic changes in the sun radiate outward through solar wind, thereby increasing the charge of interstellar space. This article specifically mentions Pluto also, writing that another affirmation of solar change comes from Pluto. Pluto resides on the icy outskirts of the solar system near a giant shell of astronomical bodies known as the Oort cloud. Although Pluto resides in the coolest regions of the solar system, the dwarf planet is heating up. Specifically, Pluto's atmospheric pressure has increased by 300%, which is more than any other planet in the solar system. Even more paradoxical, Pluto's atmosphere is becoming denser as it travels farther away from the sun. Due to this, scientists suspect Pluto is at the forefront of a high-energy region of the galaxy that the solar system is beginning to reside in. This could be one reason why climate deniers and vocal environmentalists are so quick to be labeled as terrorists according to Western criteria. It might seem that the global elites are not wanting the general public to understand what is really going on, even though bits of information keep coming out from numerous sources. Although various cabal-controlled groups may succeed over the short term in creating fear over climate change to justify a fear-based agenda and reasons for certain actions as being allegedly necessary, the fact remains that changes are happening at a much higher level than merely our planet, and this, among so many other truths, is one piece of information that will eventually be made known to all. In a separate but related story, another planet that has been revealed to have water is apparently not getting the respect it deserves. This according to the man who played Captain James Kirk in the original Star Trek TV series, William Shatner. In an interview with the Huffington Post on October the 8th, Shatner was quoted as saying that the discovery is really the discovery of life other than on Earth, says Shatner. We have now discovered, although not literally, water is the origin of life, and we've found water, so there are life forms on Mars, and therefore other places. It's the destruction of the uniqueness of the Earth and biblical passages which say we're the only ones around. I mean, it's an enormous discovery, and I don't think it's been treated with the proper respect. In tech news now, there are no doubt a number of listeners who are interested in recent announcements being made by the Keshe Foundation. Due to some time constraints leading up to the newscast, I was unable to finish my work on this story in time for this evening's broadcast. My apologies for this. It is my hope to be able to offer more information relating to this story on next week's show. Finally, in health news, it is no longer such a big secret that the cancer industry is just a huge financial cash cow and scam for big medicine and especially big pharma. Big pharma, as many people are beginning to learn, is simply a greedy group of profit takers who create synthetic copies of natural healing remedies while criminalizing or destroying the natural remedies for the purposes of controlling humanity through sickness and dependence upon those synthetic products. Of course, those who are going through cancer will never listen to someone who does not have cancer, because the belief is that the healthy person could simply have no understanding of what it is like to have cancer, to lose someone to cancer, or even to survive cancer. All of this, however, stems from the media propaganda that has surrounded the lucrative cancer industry. Therefore, it falls upon the courageous people who do have cancer, who are willing to stand up and speak out about it all and what they have learned and experienced. An article appearing on the althealthworks.com website on October 7th tells the story of former Los Angeles Times staff writer Lori Becklund, a woman who has battled breast cancer since 1996 and passed away last February. Beckland wrote her final article, As I Lay Dying, sharing with her readers what she had learned about cancer and the industry. She is quoted in the article as writing the following: I had more than 20 mammograms and none of them caught my disease. In fact, we now have significant studies showing that routine mammogram screening, which may result in misdiagnoses, unnecessary treatment, and radiation overexposure, can harm more people than it helps. The article continues, to detect a cancer early in many cases means to catch it before it produces symptoms. That is a problem because not every precancerous condition will actually become cancer, or not the type of cancer that can affect a person's life. But every case is treated as if it was the same type of cancer. Mammogram screening is responsible for about 25% of overdiagnoses in breast cancer, according to an article published in Oxford Journals. The overdiagnosis may harm patients and lead to overuse of anti-cancer therapies, such as chemotherapy. The article addresses the misdiagnoses and overdiagnoses of cancer in women, resulting in what amounts to unnecessary treatments for women and lots of money for doctors and the industry. The article also addresses the nature of many cancers and how only one kind of cancer can kill, and that is the metastatic cancer, the kind that can spread to other parts of the body. This was the cancer that Beckland had. Beckland feels that the medical establishment fails its patients. Beckland notes that an estimated 40,000 metastatic breast cancer patients die annually. Another 250,000 are waiting for their deaths. I say, and this is Beckland writing, estimated because no one is required to report a metastatic diagnosis. Death certificates normally report symptoms such as respiratory failure, not the actual disease. We are literally uncounted, Beckland wrote. What is arguably the most important point, a point that I have been trying to share repeatedly with listeners, is that there is no solution that will work for everyone in exactly the same way. As an energetic entity, each human is uniquely different, and therefore no medication or treatment will work in exactly the same way for each person. Big Pharma and Big Medicine have been counting on this. Beckland writes, we are each, in effect, one-person clinical trials. Yet the knowledge generated from those trials will die with us because there is no comprehensive database of metastatic breast cancer patients. Beckland has a message also for all those who support things like the Pink Ribbon campaigns or related cancer awareness campaigns. She asks readers the following: promise me you'll never wear a pink ribbon in my name or drop $1 into a bucket that goes into breast cancer awareness for early detection for a cure, which is the mantra of fundraising juggernaut Susan G. Komen, which has propagated a distorted message about breast cancer and how to cure it. The article reports that Susan G. Komen's income was $287,409,000 in 2014, and allegedly 79% went into its programs for education, research, and support. Yet, besides being aware, the money spent for over 30 years, $2.6 billion worth, did little for the survival rates of the breast cancer that actually kills, MBC, metastatic breast cancer. Pink is pretty, but it does not disguise the fact that metastatic breast cancer kills, reads the Metaphysical Take Action page. Now, if all that money had been put into electing politicians who recognize and support the holistic health industry and who recognize the benefits of cannabis and cannabis oil in dealing with cancer and numerous other health challenges, perhaps Beckland and so many others may not have needed to die. However, they did so, but left a message that it is time to snap out of this brainwashing that has been perpetrated upon humans. Although the article shares a woman's perspective relating to breast cancer, it could easily also apply to male prostate cancer, and arguably certain other types of cancers, at least within the human body. We can find our way back to health, and Big Pharma is not a part of it. Big Medicine, except in the cases of treating emergency situations, also does not play a part in preventative health care, as the industry has historically only been focused on disease treatment, as opposed to disease prevention, or the study of symptoms that manifest illness and disease. Mike Adams, reporting for the Natural News website on October 8th, has revealed that with $100 billion a year now being spent on toxic chemotherapy treatments that damage patients and cause chemo brain side effects, a panel of cancer experts commissioned by the National Cancer Institute publicly admitted 2 years ago that tens of millions of cancer cases aren't cancer at all. Tens of millions of people who have been diagnosed with cancer by crooked oncologists and scared into medically unjustified but extremely profitable chemotherapy treatments never had any sort of life-threatening condition to begin with, scientists have confirmed. The article continues, these treatments are helping generate $100 billion a year in chemotherapy revenues, often for so-called cancers that shouldn't even count as cancer in the first place. Physicians, patients, and the general public must recognize that overdiagnosis is common and occurs more frequently with cancer screening, warns the NCI-commissioned science article in the Journal of American Medical Association. The link to both articles will be in the show summary for this story. As one begins to expand one's consciousness, part of this understanding involves becoming aware of the energetic nature of who and what we are, as well as the connection to the energetic nature of which we are all a part. In the last story, we looked at the physical manifestation of an illness. This physical manifestation, however, took place over a longer period of time, in which an individual created negative energies within one's body, without having an appropriate outlet to release those energies. In today's never-ending rush for survival, one often covers up one's emotions and feelings because the needs of the day become more important than the needs of the self. An article appearing on the in5d.com website last January by Lawrence Mikhail explores further our physical pains and their metaphysical meanings. Mikhail writes the following, everything on the physical plane is a manifestation of something on the metaphysical plane. When we speak of abundance, what we are really talking about is an abundance of emotional, mental, and spiritual energy. We fill ourselves to the brim with these energies, and it is the overflow that is manifest on the physical plane. The signs and symptoms that are apparent on the physical plane lead us to inquire, ultimately and more deeply, into ourselves as energetic and spiritual beings. We tend not to worry too much about this sort of thing when our body is working well, when we are not feeling pain, and when we are not in the throes of some chronic disease. But when our body feels pain or becomes disabled by disease or accident, we tend to start reaching out for answers. We want to know why. Or maybe we don't even want to know why, we just want to fix something we perceive is broken. Realistically, when our body refuses to do what we want it to, metaphysically it is not actually broken. It is doing its job. One of its functions is to carry messages from the higher energetic planes to us. It is then up to us to interpret these messages and take action. As mentioned previously, Western medicine tends to look only at an illness from a treatment perspective and not as an energetic symptom of another underlying energetic block. The article then notes the role of a healer by writing the following. A healer is trained in the observation and interpretation of signs and symptoms and in methods for dealing with them. Holistic healing of the individual occurs at different energetic levels. These are the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual levels. The article notes numerous observations of what physical pain may mean on a metaphysical level within the head, the back, and the legs in particular. Related to the head, the article addresses headaches in different parts of the head, the vertex, the forehead, temporal or sides of the head, as well as the occipital or back of the head. In the back, the article addresses pain in the spine, shoulders, mid-back, lower back, and the coccyx. In the legs, the article addresses pain in the hips, upper thighs, knees, the shins, the ankles, and the feet. The article also mentions pains relating to the throat, the chest or breasts, the solar plexus, as well as the stomach. If you are one experiencing pains in any of these areas, perhaps there may be information that will be meaningful for you in this article, which will appear in the show summary for this story. For the benefit of those who may not fully understand the energetic nature of physical conditions, let's look at a few examples. The article offers the following. Headaches. Pain always indicates a separation of some sort from something. Usually we say separation from what is truth. The greater the pain, the more important that something is. The top of the head is associated with our connection to the universe, or the God source. Pain here is associated with separation from that higher power. It is also associated with the kidneys and the emotion of fear. The forehead is associated with the third eye, both in chakra theory and traditional Chinese medical theory. The third eye is associated with introspection and illumination of your own inner being. Pain in this area is associated with separation from your own inner being. The sides of the head are associated with courage, especially courage to face your world. Migraine headaches, usually located in the front quadrants, right or left, indicates a separation from your world. The involvement of the eyes in migraines indicate not only an unwillingness to look without, but also to not look within. The back of the head represents your past. Some say this also is an area of spirituality. Pain here represents something in your past that is not complete and remains unforgiven. Pain in the hips, according to the article, represent decisions in life, especially decisions about moving forward. Pain in the hips is a sign of being stuck, unable to make a decision or see clearly what is needed to be done next. Knees represent pride. In spiritual practice, it is suggested that one must go down before one can rise up. Knee problems may be said to indicate being stuck in the ego, too proud to bend. Louise Hay, author of You Can Heal Your Life, also suggests that knees represent pride and ego. It is the ego that often keeps one from surrendering to divine will, or to the universe, or to the process of life. Finally, the throat represents our will and our ability to communicate, both with others and with ourselves. Sore throats, lumps in the throat, and tumors all represent difficulties in saying what we want to say. Lumps, both physical tumors and those that are non-manifest, are our willful attempts to block free expression of emotion and of our identity. The throat is another one of those weak links that can seduce or sabotage you from your truth. The throat is the channel between the head and the heart. Beginning a deeper exploration of the pains one is feeling in one's body can offer more insights into how one is living and what one must do to restore the energetic balance within one's body, as opposed to merely seeking a medical treatment to suppress the energies further. It is a journey of self-exploration and awakening, and at this time, more and more people worldwide are stepping into this journey and are helping in their own ways to co-create the better world that many are claiming to want to experience. In this week's final words, more and more people are finally starting to ask the deeper questions, such as, what is the purpose of my life? Or what is the meaning of this life as we are now living it? or some variation of these questions, or perhaps a question similar to them. If you happen to be one of these people, perhaps a new listener, then I say congratulations to you. You are taking steps towards joining another group of humans, a group that have begun a greater personal journey, although it is not an easy journey, for it requires self-reflection, responsibility, accountability, forgiveness of others, and forgiveness of self, among other things also. Perhaps you were one who had a feeling from a certain point in your life that you were somehow destined to do something bigger than others in your life. I am one of those people. From a very young age, I have memories of asking certain questions, of wanting to understand certain things about the world and why people treat others the way they do. I stared at the stars often, picturing life on other planets and how it may compare to the world we have created on Earth. Certainly, this was not common among other children I was hanging around. Although I did not fully grasp it at a younger age, I somehow knew that I did not exactly fit in with the regimented world that I was being forced to live. To varying degrees, I could play the game. I went to school, I learned the things they told me to learn, and I overdosed on math and science courses in high school, which almost caused me to fail, because that was the direction I was told to focus by a school system advocating that these courses would lead to the best jobs. Eckhart Tolle is credited with saying that you are here to enable the divine purpose of the universe to unfold. That is how important you are. Another article appearing on the in5d.com website by Jordana Eyre, this one on October the 6th, explores 8 signs that help one identify if one is meant for something bigger on this planet. Perhaps you may see one or more of these within yourself as you reflect on your true life purpose at this time. I saw some of myself in the author as she started out writing the following. I knew from very early on that societal constraints, shoulds, and rules didn't really mean anything. I could be and do anything I wanted. And then I found roadblocks, or maybe just the speed bumps of life. I kept reaching for more, but encountered fear, doubt, challenging situations, and naysayers. Thankfully, I never stopped believing. I always knew it was possible to live into the vastness of my visions and become as big as I wanted. It's taken time to align my beliefs with this truth inside of me so that I could live into my knowing, but it's been worth it. The author continues, this beautiful planet is crawling with those of us who want to make a difference, who know we are capable of anything. Some of us are there living it fully. Some are in the midst of the dance of taking a few steps forward and a couple of steps back. And others are just beginning to wake up to the realization that this knowing has been inside of them all along, and it's time to do something about it. The 8 signs, as offered by Eyre, are as follows. 1. You suck at working for other people. You're a born leader and you know it, or maybe you don't know it. But either way, you're just not into doing things that aren't catalyzing big change. You feel stuck working for others. You want freedom, flexibility, creativity, and expansion, and you just don't feel you can fully achieve that while working for someone else. You know that your vision is worth something and that getting to apply all of your gifts is the only way you'll be fully satisfied. And that is certainly one I can personally relate to. Number 2, you tend to put off things until you're really inspired. In this one, Eyre suggests that many humans will procrastinate from time to time. There is the self-sabotaging kind of procrastination, but ultimately it comes down to things that we know we have to get done, and things we are truly inspired to get done. When you look at the list of things to do, is there fear behind it, or merely is there just a lack of inspiration? If it is the latter, Eyre suggests that you trust that doing exactly what you're inspired to do is leading you to where you need to be. Often, that inspiration knows more than we do about what's really possible. Number 3, As a kid, you thought adults who wore suits and went off to work were crazy. You've always known, somewhere deep within you, that there was more to life than living a cookie-cutter, safe, pragmatic lifestyle. You knew you could have a much bigger impact on the world if you did it your way, and that your way would involve more freedom and flexibility than those crazy adult types had. And now, whether you've fully achieved it yet or not, you know that feeling you had as a kid is utterly true. You've witnessed and felt what it's like to live just as much on purpose in your flip-flops as you have in your business suit. Number 4, you love what you do so much you'd do it for free. Here's the irony. You deserve to know your value, and the more you begin to charge your full value for your contribution you're making to the world, the more value those you serve will actually receive. However, you know you're on purpose and meant to do big things when you love what you do so much that you're willing to do it for no money, and it is not even on your mind. Number 5, you're an idealist. You see the world at its best and will stop at nothing to get there. The writer shares a bit of her childhood here and how she experienced being called an idealist. The reality of the world we have created is that children who demonstrated any kind of higher awareness, compassion for others, animals, or the planet, or who demonstrated critical thinking were often mistreated by the school system or by one's peers. Many were unable to stand up to that at a young age, and I, meaning me and not the author, was one of those. Others were able to do that more successfully. In some areas of my life, I am much stronger in being the individual I know myself to be, regardless of what others think, say, or do. In some other areas, however, I am still very much a work in progress. Number 6, you can't always say how you know things, but sometimes you just know. Visionaries don't usually get their visions from what's outside of them or from what the world tells them they should create. They get their visions from an internal drive to create what feels right for them. That knowing of what they need to create goes hand in hand with a knowing of all sorts of things. Call it intuition, call it gut feeling, call it spidey senses. If you are meant for something bigger in this world, that knowing will keep speaking up and asking you for what it wants. Number 7, you feel things. Big time. You may not have been taught that it's okay to feel. You may have been taught, in fact, that your feelings will get in the way of being awesome. Well, let's reframe that. Sometimes our feelings are our truth. Your ability to be big and contribute to the world in a huge way is dependent upon your truth. So allow your feelings to show up and to guide you to where you need to be. Your creations depend upon it. And finally, and this is one that I completely and wholly resonate with in my life, I could perhaps say that this one has been a single guiding factor in my life. Number 8, you're more frustrated by having too many ideas than you are by not having any at all. You tend to get inspired easily. In fact, the more awesome your life becomes, the more inspired you become. But sometimes it's a bit of a conundrum. You know you're meant to create big things, but if you're not careful, you can allow yourself to get stopped up by all of the things that you want to create without actually getting anything done. Don't let this get to you. Be grateful that you're so full of awesome ideas. If you're not sure where to start or what to focus on, call upon some support, but don't let your plethora of visions within your vision get in the way. In my personal life now, it has been relatively easy for me to see all the challenges currently facing our planet and the root causes for what we have been experiencing. It is also relatively easy for me to envision the solutions, whether it be on a galactic, global, national, municipal, or individual level. I understand why people are challenged to make things work on a personal or individual level, or even at a micro level within their own bodies. I feel I have at least some understanding as to why certain things have to happen at a galactic level before they can fully manifest on a physical level on Earth. I have an understanding of what has been blocking the evolution of life on Earth, and I can envision solutions on many levels. The trick and the personal challenge for me personally, and hopefully for others among the listeners, has been to try to collate all of these into some kind of step-by-step plan that will make this transformation easier for humanity and our planet, without having to continue playing games on so many levels while wasting money, time, energy, and resources trying to put out fires when the problem can perhaps be more easily addressed on a different level. So, if you happen to be one who feels destined for something greater, take heart. You are not alone, and there are no doubt thousands, if not tens of thousands of souls worldwide who are beginning to grasp the extent of their importance to the world, especially now. Embrace who you are and trust in the truth that you came here to share, and courageously live that truth. I cannot promise that life will be easy in making this choice, but I do believe I can promise that if more humans did make this choice, there would be increasingly less humans who have to experience hardship in standing up for a better humanity and a better planet. The ones experiencing the hardship have willingly, lovingly, and courageously done this to be the example that others would someday choose to follow. That moment appears to be getting closer and closer. Links to Jordana's website and work will appear in the final words part of the show summary. Create a wonderful week. Until our next Moment of Now. So that is a sample of the unfolding higher consciousness news around the world this week. Cosmic Vision News is broadcast weekly from the CosmicVisionNews.com website. Links to stories used in this broadcast are published in the show summary, which is also available on the website. CVN can be followed through the CVN Facebook page, Scene page, YouTube channel, as well as Twitter, Google+, and LinkedIn. Thank you for sharing your time with me. I'm Jeffrey West, reminding you that you are here to enable the divine purpose of the universe to unfold. That is how important you are. Until our next Moment of Now, stay grounded in love, hold the vision of light and peace in your hearts, and keep your eyes to the skies. Disclosure is unfolding all around you. Namaste.